There's this wonderful story that you probably have heard, maybe not. It took place recently in a New Jersey farm sanctuary. It is a place for lame and blind animals. A duck called Merlin was injured and could not walk. And he was sunbathing on the grass one day when a 7-month-old lamb by the name of Gigi curled up next to him. She visited Merlin the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and they started snuggling and grooming one another. This became a daily routine between the duck and the lamb. The founder of the sanctuary said Gigi was just trying to comfort Merlin, and it developed into a very, very special relationship. Maybe we can learn something from our animal friends about cuddling and grooming one another. But cuddling and snuggling and grooming with strangers during this pandemic is really and obviously something we should not be doing. As sickness, fear, despair, and loneliness plague a growing number of us, it is wearisome in trying to imagine when our lives will become more normal. So today's gospel offers a warm welcome and effective antidote. Love God with all of our hearts and love one another just like we love ourselves. In his expansive and beautifully written letter, Fratelli Tutti, I like to translate it as little sisters and brothers all, Pope Francis tells you and me this is a time to heal broken societies from division. It is a time to avoid being greedy, thinking only of ourselves. It's a time to care for the planet. Do not forget those living on the margins of society, and be kind toward one another, especially strangers. Francis, it seems, is calling the Catholic Church and all others to a global perspective beyond our own diocesan and parochial borders. Some say Francis wants us to be a missionary church again, to welcome all people everywhere. That's what Paul is saying to the Thessalonians, because he was saying that the religion that Jesus was responsible for founding in many, many different ways by his actions, that faith was open to all peoples and not just Jewish people. So Paul was reaching out in an ecumenical and interfaith way. However, the commandment to love one another is not an original commandment with Jesus, nor is it original with Francis. It is borrowed from texts in the Hebrew Bible, the books of Deuteronomy and the books of Leviticus. In writing about Francis's encyclical, a good friend of mine, a Jewish scholar by the name of Larry Hoffman, elucidated that the encyclical expressly honors rabbinic tradition by, for example, attributing Jesus' golden rule to the first rabbi, Hillel. And here's what that reference says. What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. Very simple. Later on, in the 6th century BCE, in the Common Era after Jesus, the Quran, which is the Bible for the Muslims, offers the same rule. Do good to parents, kinsfolk, orphans, the poor, and your neighbors who are strangers. And so the important thing here is that clearly all three of these faiths belonging to the same family tree, that's how we got started, agree on an approach to resolving the tensions that exist in the world today. Love one another as you love yourself. And in doing so, God will love you, and you will love God. So how is it then, generally speaking, that we human beings who frequently refer to our sacred texts for guidance on how to live today are having such a hard time abiding by the golden rule? It's a very interesting question. Like the wolf and the lamb in the book of Isaiah that we read during the season of Advent, and like the little duck and the lamb in the story that I told earlier. What will it take for us, for you and for me, poetically speaking, to cuddle up to one another, to groom our behavior patterns so to harmonize all human relationships? Human history records some absolutely marvelous accomplishments achieved by humanity at large. People from all races, creeds, nationalities have contributed immensely to the fields of science, technology, religion, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. We hear about STEM being so important in our schools, but I prefer the acronym STREAM because it includes two other essential facets of our educational process: religion and the arts. We rely on these advancements every day, sometimes without even thinking about their goodness or the energy that drives them. Being mindful of these achievements, however, could just be the medicine that you and I need, rather than focusing on the polarizations, the arguments, the negativity that surrounds us, problems only exacerbated by this awful pandemic. Thankful for families and friends, we must come to believe that we can get through this troubling time together because it is a temporary time. We hope and pray. The hard part is trying to concentrate less on my own problems so I can work for the common good. A phrase we hear a lot about these days. Everybody wants the common good. What are our religious and government leaders doing to help us in that is a fair question. In the United States, our sense of individualism is prized, of course, but unfortunately it also stymies many, not all of us, but many, when it comes to caring for one another. Now, some will say that religion has no place in addressing political issues. We should not talk about these things while we're in church, or a synagogue, or a mosque. Well, try telling that to the Talmudic sages who wrote the Hebrew Bible. Tell that to the early Christian writers that are really the groundswell for our Christian religion. Tell that to the first Caliphate scribes who penned many of the sections of the Quran. Tell that to Martin Luther King Jr. or Mother Teresa or Elie Wiesel or Dorothy Day, all men and women who have worked very, very hard to change rules and regulations so that they would be fair to all people. Tell that to some of the major global religions still seeking power within their own nation states. Religious life is political, because politics deals with the affairs of our cities, and we are responsible for the affairs of our cities. That's what the Bible tells us. It is exactly the pursuit of all religions to take action in the world, to heal the brokenhearted, to take down imperial dictators, to build up hopes for the poor and the oppressed. We'll read a lot about that in next week's Gospel on All Saints' Day when we hear the Beatitudes again. Listen carefully to what those Beatitudes are saying. In this sense, people of all faiths, we are called to unite and take our sacred text out into the streets to see to it that this country of ours, or any nation, makes laws and then enforces these laws to assure that all citizens are treated fairly. Love God and our neighbor as ourselves. It is a golden rule that is often very hard to keep. Yet, snuggling and grooming one another is still a worthwhile dream. It will bring comfort to all of us. For as Paul said in writing to the Ephesians, we are no longer strangers to one another.